Majority Report with Sam Sciutto, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Sciutto.
It is Friday, August 27th, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Sciutto, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Alex Pareene of the New Republic, the Politics of Everything podcast, and the AP Substack in the first hour. And in the second hour, Lance from the Serfs will be joining us to talk about Canada's upcoming election. Meanwhile, 2 explosions outside the Kabul airport have killed at least 100 people, mostly Afghan civilians, and including 13 U.S. service members, by 2 suicide bomb attacks carried out by an ISIS affiliate, ISIS-K, in an act of rivalry to the Taliban. President Biden responded to these attacks, committing to continue carrying out the evacuation despite overwhelming calls for re-escalation by the press and hawkish members of his own party, plus the Republicans, of course. However, he did vow a response. More on that later. The Supreme Court has overturned the Biden administration's extension of the eviction moratorium, leaving around 3.5 million on the brink of houselessness and eviction in a 6-3 ruling. Bet you can guess how that was divided up. An Arkansas physician is under investigation after claiming to have prescribed the anti-parasitic drug Ivermectin to thousands of people for COVID-19, including the prisoners, as the CDC, is reporting that calls to poison control centers have rapidly increased after an unsubstantiated push to take the drug by right-wing and conspiratorial media. Illinois has announced a statewide indoor mask mandate despite vaccination status and a vaccine requirement for all teachers unless they want to face testing. And in Hawaii, COVID-19 is surging, especially among the native population. Their vaccination rate is lower than the rest of the state. And lastly, in Texas, the State House of Representatives has advanced their voter suppression bill, and it is expected to be passed today despite widely publicized efforts from the Democratic minority. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. A little cough at the end of those headlines because there was not one positive headline on this Casual Friday that I read there. Obviously, the situation in Afghanistan has continued to dominate the news cycle. The framing of it is something that enrages me quite deeply. And you just see it from every section of the press. Bob Menendez, senator from New Jersey, member of Biden's own party, calling for an investigation into the withdrawal. These displays of American might not being so mighty is really what is getting people's goats. Let's start with H.R. McMaster, former national security advisor to Donald Trump. He got a lot of treatment as a media darling in the Trump era and post-Trump era once he was fired for criticizing Trump after he no longer was employed by him. Kind of easy. He would do a lot of that criticism on their airways for publicity and to help his own career. And let's be clear, most of that criticism boiled down to he's not hawkish enough on North Korea. He's not hawkish enough on Iran. He was openly against re-entering a peace deal with Iran. So he's this media creation as an acceptable, if not heroic figure who stood up to Trump by getting fired.
What's the way we valorize military figures in general? Also,
he was their he was a twofer, right? We could valorize a military general and also criticize the Trump administration. in the same breath. So now he's on CNN, baselessly speculating about these suicide bombs carried out by ISIS-K. They claimed responsibility, killing over 100 people, mostly Afghan civilians and 13 American service members, wounding many more. It's a tragedy because it's a war, and war is unconscionable and a tragedy. And it's well known that, by the way, ISIS-K and the Taliban, who's currently in part working with the United States to get Americans out of the country, because they don't want their rule challenged any longer. Taliban's like, get out of here, United States. We want to fully take over. And ISIS-K is kind of an upstart, smaller group that wants to express their own opposition and wants to be an alternative to the Taliban. They're a different type of group. They're younger. They're more militant. The Taliban has a little bit more money, more entrenched. Obviously, they've been around for many years. We know about that. So McMaster, though, has a different unsubstantiated theory. He decided to remix the bin Laden's working with Saddam theory from the start of the Iraq War. Let's hear what he opined without evidence on cable TV yesterday.
This is what we're facing, and this is what happens when you surrender to jihadist terrorists. And I think, Jim, what's important about this, you may hear this is ISIS-K or whatever, but these terrorist organizations exist in an ecosystem along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border and now all across Afghanistan, in which they share people and resources. You know, Siraj Haqqani is the military commander of the Taliban, and he's a central figure in al-Qaeda. This is a myth, right, that the Taliban is separate from al-Qaeda and these other groups. I would not be surprised in any way if ISIS-K was used, their Kabul attack network was used as a cutout for the Taliban, so they can humiliate us on the way out and still continue to play us, because I don't think they think we're serious people, Jim. I mean, so our weakness is encourage them to be emboldened, and of course they're going to have, as you mentioned, a safe haven support base, access to resources that will make them extraordinarily dangerous, as well as the ability now to say, hey, look, we're winning, right? We've established the Islamic Emirate in Khorasan. Come to our cause. Much like
that, ISIS-K is a cutout. Just two headlines from last year. Military Times on February 27, 2020, ISIS loses more than half of its fighters from U.S. airstrikes and Taliban ground operations. WAPO, Washington Post, October 22nd, 2020. The U.S. is secretly helping the Taliban fight ISIS with air power. So, anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't know. They exist in an ecosystem, which means something.
I mean, that guy's, McMaster, just a mendacious, liar and fabricator of truth. And, we talk about CNN, that is state-controlled television, basically. What a disgraceful segment by Jim Sciutto there.
Wait for the end, because he asked a question that's kind of cut off, but the framing is unbelievable. But I just, before we go back to the clip, these terrorist organizations exist in an ecosystem. Is a rivalry an ecosystem? It's not symbiotic. They are fighting one another, and it's just an ecosystem is code for they're all Muslim, right?
They exist in an ecosystem we've been flooding with guns for decades now.
Yeah. That's some kind of ecosystem. Let's continue.
In Khorasan, come to our cause, much like ISIS did when they recruited 30,000 fighters at the drop of a hat, right? Once they took over territory the size of Britain in Iraq and in Syria. And then, of course, we had to go back, Jim. So now what I would just ask, what was it worth it, really? What would be a better outcome? A sustained commitment of a few thousand U.S. troops who are continuing to enable the Afghans to bear the brunt of this fight, or this catastrophe that we're seeing now, right? We had this end the endless wars narrative, Jim. But hey, guess what? This is an endless jihad that the enemies of all civilized people are waging against us. And if we don't acknowledge that, we are putting ourselves at an extraordinarily high risk.
And one lesson of recent years with terrorism is that victory equals recruiting. When ISIS took over portions of Iraq.
That is not the lesson. You know what creates recruiting? The United States murdering your family. That's what creates terrorism. That's what creates recruiting.
Was ISIS-K there at the start of the U.S. occupation?
Yeah. What? You want to talk about recent history, Jim Sciutto? Let's talk about the fuller context of the history and the war on terror. Why was ISIS created in Syria? Why did ISIS become what it is today? Right? It's because of our own destabilizing of the region. It's because of our war in Iraq.
It's because of our contributions to the ecosystem.
Yeah, right, exactly. Which we allowed to thrive endlessly by making it fertile ground for terrorism by flooding it with guns. It's essentially a great way to crop those things up and to make it
collapses into a civilization of Muslim versus Christianity thing.
Right. So, like, there are so many things that he said there. Humiliate us, our weakness, right? They don't think we're serious people, probably because they know that we just bomb and abandon and don't know the differences between two rival groups, one as an established militant guerrilla army force in the Taliban and one as an upstart one offshoot, which was founded by people who left the Afghan and Pakistan Taliban and started this more poor to middle class guerrilla force that wants to compete for influence in the region. And they've been fighting over territory, specifically in northern Afghanistan, on a regular basis. That's probably why they don't necessarily see us as serious as we kill with abandon in the region. They know we don't know anything. We're rubes that walk around and hand out cash and set up gyms in the Afghan government and give and flood the country with guns and bombs and technology that they can use. Like, why would they respect us? And they're certainly not going to respect us when we murder more people that they know. Like, that's what you learn from recent years, is that their own victory equals recruiting.
I mean, it's a propaganda line. He didn't actually learn that. They're lying.
Yeah.
Jim Sciutto is the type of guy who blamed politics on not letting the military win this. He's a threat to democracy, in my opinion.
So this is what we're hearing, and we're going to do the same thing over and over again. If you're a Muslim group, you must be tied to the other Muslim group. And that's how we're going to conduct our foreign policy, based on vague, amorphous, just constant Islamophobia that sees these brown people as savages. You heard him say it there, civilized. They're a threat to the rest of the civilized world. And the only way they're going to learn their lesson is if we kill a few more. If we kill a lot more, maybe. And that's the case for a sustained presence. And it's being aided and abetted again by CNN, again by our media. We're doing this again. And the only thing that's saving us right now is literally like Biden just sticking to his guns. So thankfully that's happening. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but that's the reality, because the forces right now are aligned. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will be joined by Alex Pareene.
Hey, folks. Today's sponsor also includes Gabi. Look, there are hundreds of companies out there claiming to compare auto and home insurance rates, but there's only one who actually does it. You get a better insurance with Gabi. It's the one true comparison platform with fast, verifiable quotes, not a ballpark guess. These are specific quotes. Gabi uses your current policy to find you a better policy. It compares your current coverage with 40 of the top insurance providers, like Progressive, like Nationwide, like Travelers, and it does so all in one place. It's free, and they only show policies that are same or better than your current coverage, many of them at a lower price. Gabi customers save $961 per year on average. They will never sell your info, so you don't get any annoying spam, you don't get any robocalls. Check it out. I went through the process to check it out, and it is super, super easy to use, Gabi. And the idea that you're going to get quotes that are actual quotes not estimations or sort of like teaser things. Pretty amazing. So check it out. Put your policy to the test like I did. You get better insurance with Gabi. It's totally free to check, and there's no obligation. Go to Gabi.com/majority. That's GABI.com/majority. Gabi.com/majority. We will put that link in our podcast and YouTube description. Emma? Hey, today's episode of The Majority Report is brought to you by Sunset Lake CBD. SunsetLakeCBD.com. Sunset Lake is my go-to for tinctures that help me with sleeping, salve that helps me with really, it's supposed to help muscle aches, has arnica in it. But frankly, I use it for my eczema, and I've found a lot of relief from it. They've got hemp-infused hand lotion. They've got fudge and great-tasting coffee that's infused with CBD, which is my weekend brew. They've got gummies. They've got smokables. They've got pre-rolls. All of it, highest quality. They have third parties who test it and put all the results on their website and will send it to you as well. Plus, they have great business practices, $15 minimum wage, companies mostly employee-owned. They have great farming practices. No pesticides. They use integrated pest management as a way of dealing with pests, and 100% organic fertilizer. They work with the University of Vermont for their regenerative agriculture practices. And now they have a new feature, which they don't call it this, but I call it the Sam Cedar feature, if you will. It is basically allows you, where do I have it here? Well, it is, you know that with Left is Best, you get 20% off of anything there. Coupon code Left is Best. Well, now, for folks who might be like me, that you need to habitualize everything, you don't want to reach over at, you go into bed and find that your tincture is empty. Well, now you can get easily get their handcrafted CBD products from Sunset Lake CBD automatically delivered to your door every month with a 25% discount. This is great for you if you're like me, you want to automate everything, or if you know somebody who might have trouble ordering online and to do it repeatedly. Maybe sometimes they forget, maybe it's just difficult for them to navigate the internet. This subscription service from Sunset Lake CBD will be a huge help. Check it out now, www.sunsetlakecbd.com.
We are back, and we are joined by the one and only Alex Pareene of the New Republic, the Politics of Everything podcast, and the AP Substack, not the AP, but AP for Alex Pareene. You can find that on Substack. Alex, thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.
Yeah, and you're coming to us from a different location.
Yes, I'm coming to you live from vacation in Los Angeles in beautiful Echo Park. There was once I remember Andrew Ross Sorkin, the business columnist for the New York Times, once did a CNBC hit from the docks in Nantucket. It has stuck with me for many years, but I'm trying to recreate that energy right now.
It's not exactly the same, but I appreciate your attempt to kind of ingratiate yourself to the wealthy powers that be, right?
Yes.
But you did inform me that I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were on vacation. Thank you for joining us." But you've got something to plug, so this is benefit for you too.
That's right. Yeah, I have a new newsletter now. I'm a member of the newsletter elite now. But yeah, I just launched the AP parentheses Alex Pareene. I'm not affiliated with any news agency that may use similar initials. But it's the ap.substack.com, and please go subscribe. I'm going to try to make it good.
How can one's initials be similar? They might just have to be the same.
They might, I don't know. I've heard a lot of conflicting theories about whether or not the initials could be the same, whether they could be similar. But yes, the newsletter is theap.substack.com.
There is a different font being used, I think.
Yeah, it's a completely different word mark.
Gotcha. Well, then you've avoided all legal culpability in this area, so congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure if you turned into the early part of the show, but I was yelling. I listened to H.R. McMaster on cable television talking about how we cannot be certain that ISIS-K, who carried out those deadly, horrible attacks on the Kabul airport yesterday, is not working with the Taliban because they're all in the same ecosystem, aka they're both brown and Muslim. So we're doing this again. We're creating links between rival groups and using it as an excuse to keep ourselves engaged in a forever conflict and the forever war and forever bloodshed. The one difference is that Biden doesn't seem to be buying it this time. But I guess talk about what you've observed over the past week or so when it comes to this conversation.
I'm sure this has come up on the show, but I just read Spencer Ackerman's new book about the history of the War on Terror, Reign of Terror. And to go back into the early 2000s and the political debate and the media landscape, it's absolutely stunning that everyone just is replaying it, because that was the atmosphere then in the onset of the War on Terror, was to create an undifferentiated enemy consisting of Islam in general, and in doing so to conflate all these different, often warring groups. That's how we ended up going into Iraq. The people in the Bush administration, for many of them, they just said now, for some of them it was just now we have an excuse to do it, but there was a just genuine sense that they all have to be in it together somehow, right? And it's what the media and it's what the warmongers are doing now. They want to ignore the messy political realities of the actual situation there and ignore the actual different groups involved and just say we're at war against the concept, and to go to war against this concept, which involves everyone who could be up to no good in this one part of the country. We can't let the fact that the Taliban are actual avowed enemies of ISIS-K, we can't let that get in the way of our war on the concept. And it's alarming to see how easily the media slipped back into this. But as you say, I am sort of surprised at the resolve Biden has showed in the face of it.
It's amazing, right? It's amazing to hear these words come out of our mouths.
Yeah, exactly.
Probably because we're on Peacock. We're selling out here. No.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it must be it. But I am interested in it because he is correct that a lot of what maintained our presence there was this just fear of the blowback that they were going to get whatever president withdrew our troops. And part of it too is just we want to continue United States hegemony and we're a part of this American empire project. Ideologically they wanted to do it too, but there was a fear of the press losing their minds exactly the way that they're doing right now, because there was going to be mess and there was going to be bloodshed whenever we did withdraw. So his resolve and his ability to kind of just say, no, I'm going to be a curmudgeon and stick to this. There's bravery in that, honestly.
Yeah. And there's something really galling about reading, you'll see a stray line in a New York Times column that'll be Biden's taken a hit from his messy Afghanistan withdrawal. And it's you're the ones delivering the hit. This is you delivering the hit right now. And that sort of unwillingness to acknowledge their own role in the creation of narratives is one of the most annoying features of the political press. But and I think it had to be a guy like Biden in a sense. Again, I've been reading histories of our forever wars. Andrew Bakovich's history I was just rereading a few weeks ago too. And like Biden was the guy in the Obama administration who was saying like the generals are yanking your chain, like the generals just want to stay there forever. They're not winning, but they want an endless commitment. They want endless commitment and they're not delivering. Biden was a guy saying that back then, and he's still that guy. And what you need is, and people have said this, but like Trump, who cares a lot about what TV says about him, even though this was his withdrawal plan, he would not have carried it out once the media turned on. But Biden, because you have a guy, I think, who is like, I think it's in part credit to his own arrogance, because he's got Senate brain, and Senate brain means like, I know more than anyone else in the room. I've been around the block. I've been doing foreign policy since before you were born. And it takes like a guy that confident in his own rightness to have actually carried this out without backtracking. So like one of his most annoying qualities is definitely working in his favor right now.
Yeah, Biden comes through the same way in Michael Hastings, The Operators. And this isn't to like put Biden on a big pedestal, because I think like the previous presidents haven't been good in this regard. But as far as standing up to the military, like that's just not something presidents have really done. Like there's old JFK tapes where he's like bitching out the military for spending too much money on like furniture. And I think he's probably the last president that would have done anything remotely close to that.
Yeah. And especially like especially since post-Vietnam, the civilian oversight of the military has been completely deferential. It's always because the civilians took the blame for losing Vietnam, and then the civilian politicians were like, we will never again question whatever the Pentagon and the DOD want. Like they're in like, you guys get whatever you want. And to have a president who is like doesn't accept that entirely. And we should say too, like, my God, the how much did the DOD and the Pentagon budget go up in the last year? Like, it's not like he's not standing up to the military. It's on this one particular thing where he's not giving them what they want, and he's standing firm. Like, it's not a sea change, but it is like still something we haven't seen in years.
Well, he's holding the line in terms of our kind of Venezuela foreign policy, Cuba. He's still, I think, more hawkish than I wish he would be when it comes to Iran. With Israel and Palestine, he's maintained the line. This has just been something where he has decided, and he's clearly felt this way for a while, that he can puff out his chest and say, no, I know better than the generals here, and you guys are trying to give me the runaround. And he's right. He's right in this instance. So, I mean, you mentioned Vietnam there, and this whole generation of politicians who grew up in the Vietnam era, and I think how much that colors their view of foreign policy, right? That's how they approach the war on terror. Like, this is going to be our righteous do-over. We're not going to do things like we did in Vietnam, where it was messy and not just, and we drafted everybody, and now we'll have a voluntary war of American might and freedom and going after the terrorists that attacked us. And yet there still is shades of that in a lot of people in power. They're not reckoning with, no, this whole project was as unconscionable because war is unconscionable. Like, we're not there yet. The
most incredible thing about American power is that we invented this. We invented something called Vietnam syndrome after we lost the Vietnam War, and the problem was that losing the Vietnam War made Americans too wary of doing more war. That was the problem. That was what our policymakers took away. Was that like, oh man, now that we lost Vietnam, Americans might not want to do more war. And so the project for years afterwards was to make Americans more comfortable with the idea that we can have clean, decisive wars without all of the negative consequences that were felt stateside during the Vietnam War, because America is always the victim of everything bad. We're always the poor victim of everything we do in the rest of the world. So that was the guiding principle of the war on terror, and there was this false idea from the Clinton era that we could just sort of pop in and out of countries, and Afghanistan was supposed to be done overnight. Like the Bush administration stopped caring about it 10 minutes in.
Yeah. It was the appetizer. It was the appetizer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's the lesson that these people still don't want to learn, is that we lost, and there are a lot of lessons about the limitations of our power and the way we use it that we should take away from this loss. And they're not tactical lessons. They're not lessons about counterinsurgency strategy. They're lessons about what it's possible for us to use our military power to do in the world.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we're just I still don't see enough of a heeding of some of those lessons. Although I think the Iraq War generation, people that grew up during that time, like anti-war, anti-imperialism, anti-interventionism as a concept was treated as inherently unserious, right? You are not somebody that understands it. You don't understand how things work. You don't understand the real complexities of being a world superpower. And in terms of our national security establishment, they'll never learn. But the reporters that cover them, they're as gung-ho about it as their sources. And now, but I think the younger generation coming up, this will not always be as dominant as it is now. At least that's the only thing I can tell myself, because of how the Iraq War colored so many young people's ideas about American warfare.
This is part of the hysterical screeching of the entire foreign policy establishment, is that they know they lost a generation because the Iraq War protesters turned out to be right. And I don't think that there's widespread principled anti-interventionism in the sense of we don't have a generation of pacifists, but what we have is a generation that's incredibly cynical about American power and incredibly skeptical of America's ability to wield power in the world in the way that these people think that we should. And that is, I think, psychically wounding to a lot of these people whose entire identity is built up in there being a national consensus about America's goodness, innocence, and hegemonic power. The fact that there is a generation that's skeptical of all of those things, they don't want to admit it, and they're basically inventing, stab in the back narratives to explain it away. And in the media front, I remain unsurprised but very depressed that for the foreign policy establishment media, they're all of them still entirely 100% sourced by defense contractors, Pentagon officials, former Pentagon officials. They have no one in their Rolodexes who was ever skeptical of any element of the war on terror. And at this point, that's ridiculous, completely irresponsible. And you get a truer sense of what all this was about reading someone who was skeptical from day one than you do from someone who has been on the ground there, but whose only sources on what is happening there are people with a vested interest in continuing the forever war.
Yeah. I mean, it would behoove them to maybe have some Afghan sources, people who live there. Yeah,
you would think maybe, yeah.
Yeah, but those aren't the serious people. Let's turn to the Supreme Court. They overturned the Biden administration / CDC's extension of the eviction moratorium in a 6-3 ruling. Now, I was told the Supreme Court doesn't matter by some progressives, but this is obviously something that's going to be devastating. 3.5 million people on the brink of houselessness and eviction. It seems like that the Biden administration was even reluctant to extend the moratorium because they knew this was inevitable. My argument was, okay, extend it and then let the Supreme Court overturn it, and I would still do it anyway, or even if it was, but you know, they knew that this was coming down the pike, but they extended it, and the Supreme Court acted fairly swiftly in favor of landlords. Talk a bit about the consequences of this and where you see it going.
Yeah, I mean, the notable thing about it is that I think the Biden administration sort of knew this would happen, and there is still not any sense of a strategy for how to deal with it happening, in the sense that, like, we now know the behavior of this court, and what it involves a lot of the time is these sort of shadow docket 6-3 rulings that are released in the dead of night that have major policy consequences that don't even happen after oral arguments. They're not even happening the way a normal Supreme Court argument would happen. They're not happening. I'm being interrupted by my son for 1 second here. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm almost done. Yeah, that's all I needed. And when I say there's not a strategy for dealing with it, like, there really has to be like some answer to an unaccountable judicial legislature, right? Like, there has to be, like, Congress has to assert its power at some point. This is not the way anything was supposed to work. And I think you can't just sit back and accept that policy can be thrown out and rewritten in this manner, and, you know, for a decade to come, because of these sort of unelected legislators, like I'm talking about. And you know, I'm not a legal expert, but the legal experts I have read are like, actually do think like Congress can reassert its power over the Supreme Court. It just chooses not to, because everyone is sort of terrified of the idea of provoking a constitutional crisis. But the constitutional crisis is here. Like, we're living through it.
Yeah, the Supreme Court actually, I think in the ruling, in the 623, said that only Congress can extend the eviction moratorium. So they left it open, but
right.
Without filibuster reform, they're not extending the eviction moratorium. And even with filibuster reform, there's been reporting about Steny Hoyer. I'm forgetting exactly which outlet, but Steny Hoyer receiving funds from a lot of the groups that are quite invested in like national, it might have not been National Association of Realtors, but there are a lot of groups that represent landlords and developers who want this moratorium overturned immediately so that they can vacate these apartments and then hike up rent. And this is the consequences of that. This is what's going to happen. And there are people in the Democratic Party who secretly are pretty okay with that.
Oh yeah. I mean, totally. And this is playing out in all sorts of economic areas in this government right now. There's a tug of war in the party. There are a lot of people in leadership whose base of support, not just in terms of their donors, but in terms of the people that they want to make up the core of the party, is realtors, landlords. You know, like they have a vision of a party that is the party of the gentry, and they don't like things like student debt cancellation and eviction moratoriums, because that's grubby politics for poor people, and that's not the vision they have for the party. So yeah, and I think like Biden's economic team has good progressive people on it, but you know, they're in the middle of a fight over who the Democratic Party is for and what it stands for. And there are definitely people in leadership who are going to welcome a Supreme Court ruling that takes the issue out of their hands, even if, as you say, it leaves it up to Congress. But it's the same as the student debt cancellation thing, where there were people in the Biden administration who really, really wanted to say, like, we just don't have the power to do that. because they want to act like they don't have the power to do it, so they don't have to take the hit for not doing it. And the eviction moratorium was extended by the same argument. The people in the administration said, "Oh, of course we don't have the power to do it," and then they had to like go find another lawyer. They had to go shop for a lawyer who was like didn't work for the Democratic Party, who told them, "Yes, you do. Here's your power." Until 6 Supreme Court justices decide to throw that out.
Yeah, I mean, if the Bush administration, speaking of them again, has taught us anything, it's that the powers of the presidency are quite flexible, and you can do a lot based on dubious legal strategies and frameworks that you can cook up. And the Biden administration, it's always a will with them, right? And they hide behind procedure. That's often the case. They have a lot more of a case with the eviction moratorium now that the Supreme Court has said this, right? But then they have to push for Congress, and they don't want to be put in that position. When it comes to student debt cancellation, as you mentioned, now that he's canceled the debt for a significant number of disabled students,
yeah,
and it was over $5 billion in debt, something to that effect. Sam's theory was that's a trial balloon to see if they can do it more expansively down the line. I'm a bit more skeptical. To me, it's showing how clear and obvious it is that they can do these kinds of things, that they can cancel debt with a stroke of the pen. But they're choosing not to do it actively, and they're hoping that nobody notices. I think that's going to be a lot harder to hide, given the trickle of their attempts to curb student debt.
I think one thing that we're seeing happen over and over again with this administration is that there are people in it who keep trying to not do things by way of arguing we don't have the power. And what's happening again and again is people like you just said are pointing to all of the recent examples in recent history we have of Republican administrations, the last two, getting away with doing all sorts of wacky stuff and facing no blowback or consequences for it, and saying like, well, why is that the rule for Republican administrations, but Democrats are constantly so constrained by these rules on executive power? Like, why are we just letting that be the case? And the answer is, if you don't like unchecked executive power, and I don't, but if you don't like it, we have to actually somehow find a way to have a legislature that stands up for itself and that functions. Like the only possible check on that power is not going to be an ultra-conservative Supreme Court. It's going to be like an actually activist House of Representatives and a Senate that is not completely hobbled by institutional like resistance to doing anything.
Yeah, and so I mean the institutional framework that provides like those hamstrings are useful in a variety of areas, right? Biden doesn't want to remove the obstacle of the filibuster in some ways because, okay, and then Mark Warner is going to have to take some stances on some issues he doesn't want to, and so am I. And then, of course, in terms of the arbitrary ones that he chooses to throw in the air for his executive authority, that also serves that same function.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big through lines of his administration. Let's turn before we wrap up to COVID, because obviously we're in the midst of another wave, and we're seeing with that new wave of COVID a new wave of snake oil. Ivermectin is in the news as a cure for COVID that is being pushed by right-wingers. It's been talked on Fox News. Of course, it's talked about constantly on the conspiracy web and in right-wing talk shows on the internet and Newsmax, etc. But like, they are getting these poison control centers a flood of calls of people who are taking ivermectin. Square this with me, Alex. How can one be so opposed to taking a vaccine that has been fine for hundreds of millions of people, proving to be effective in preventing severe illness and death, but you're going to take a horse dewormer because Alex Jones told you to?
It's because Alex Jones told you to. I mean, that's this. I think the central thing you have to understand about it is like, it's entirely about these, systems of trust and which institutions you trust. And literally, like, the logic is as simple as, if the Democratic controlled government tells me to do it, I don't trust it. And if Joe Rogan tells me to do it, then yes, I do trust it. And that sounds completely nutty to anyone with a sort of understanding of how, you know, medical science works. But you know, all of us sort of all of us outsource our decision making on health. All of us outsource our decision making on health to other people. It can be doctors, it can be government experts, it can be the media, and it's you know, what we are seeing in this, as in so many other things, is that, like, some people have outsourced their decision making to the least responsible human beings in the history of American politics, which is like the modern conservative movement, the far right fringe, who just really truly, irresponsibility is always the word I go back to with, because they truly don't care or don't even conceive of there being real world consequences for the things they say. It's really just a moment to moment, like, all right, Ivermectin now, like, that's the one we're doing now. Who the hell cares what happens after I plug this? Someone else's problem. So that's how you end up here.
Yeah, but like, if the fundamental distrust is, and I guess for a while I held this line, like, you know, the best conspiracies come from a kernel of truth, right? That these big pharma is something that is like a malignant force in the world, and so mistrust of it makes sense. And specifically for like vaccine hesitancy for people in this country, like Black people who have been experimented on and like abused by the medical system for years. Historically, there's this generational trauma. Like, you can have an understanding of where that's coming from. But if big pharma is the actual impetus behind this hesitancy, which for this group now I'm convinced it's not, you're not going to take a horse dewormer that Merck created. It's not that. It's now something different. And it's something different strategically. It is something different because someone like Trump, someone like Tucker Carlson, they saw this early. Like, give their horrible, evil brains credit. They saw that this was a constituency that was burgeoning on the right, a vaccine hesitancy. And they have ballooned this very issue for their own benefit.
They're sort of exploiting the rot of a capitalist healthcare system where a lot of people have experiences that are just brutal with our medical, like just medicine in this country. And so they turn to, like, and we're seeing it all over Facebook, just crazy. Even before the coronavirus pandemic, I saw like essential oils sorts of scams going around Facebook that was also causing poison control issues. And now we just see that this sort of, I guess, rot channel is being exploited by the GOP for campaign purposes.
I think that's exactly right. And I think well before coronavirus, I wonder how many people knew someone who, to use an example that I know of someone who did, an uninsured person who wouldn't go to the doctor, buying fish antibiotics from a pet pharmacy, right, for their own use. That's the kind of thing Americans were already doing, which is the kind of thing that primes you to eventually say, like, I will go outside of the normal healthcare channels because I think I will be exploited. I think I will be charged. I think I will end up in debt. I will go outside those channels and on my own figure out how to take care of myself. And obviously what that reading of it overlooks on that person's behalf is that they are, in this case, they are being exploited by a different group of people. They are trying to avoid the exploitation of America's for-profit healthcare empire. And in doing so, they are letting themselves be exploited by these deeply irresponsible snake oil salesmen.
Ivermectin, you've got to pay for.
Yeah.
Vaccines, but that's how free healthcare.
Yeah, I know. I don't think
Americans,
right?
Americans don't know what to do. They don't know what to do.
It's suspicious. Yeah. What?
People are actually. I've seen that sentiment. If it's supposed to be helpful, why is the government making it free? They don't make insulin free. There must be a catch. Like, that's the mindset people are in.
We should almost just give people like $1,000 voucher that they have
Yes.
the vaccine.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Just to drive the point home. Like maybe that should have been the answer. Is like we should have given everyone like a big like novelty treasury check, like an oversized. It's like $10,000 to be like, this vaccine is so expensive, but Uncle Joe's paying for it.
Right, exactly. The branding of it has been, but like I don't even necessarily know how you combat it, right? And we covered this a little while back. Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, was basically talking about how, well, why aren't the Democrats blaming black people who aren't as vaccinated as white people, even though, of course, the least vaccinated groups are, in terms of first dose, uninsured people under 65, evangelical white Christian Republicans, and just white Republicans in general. Those are the most unvaccinated groups. But they wanted to make it like a hypocrisy thing and completely divorcing the context with which they are the party that is actively telling you maybe this vaccine isn't safe, maybe it's not good for you, maybe talk to your doctor, trust the science, etc. Like they are the ones trying to promote vaccine hesitancy, and yet still want to make it it's a problem on both sides.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the irresponsibility I was talking about, right? Like they are all promoting quack non-cures and telling people not to trust the vaccine, but they don't want to be held responsible for what actually happens as a result of it.
Yeah. Except for at the polls, right? They want those very people to be activated and so outraged by the vaccine, by masks, that they're energized on a grassroots level. And if you see these school board meetings, it's working. Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, Alex, I really appreciate your time today, especially taking time away from your beautiful vacation. Is it getting increasingly hot in LA right now as you sit outside?
It is. Yeah. The temperature has been gradually rising as I talk to you. Yes.
I kind of like, I saw it happening and I felt your discomfort. So I'm going to let you go and get inside for some air conditioning.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Everybody check out the AP Substack for Alex Pareene, the Politics of Everything podcast, and Alex's work at the New Republic. Thanks so much, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, quick break. We will come back to wrap things up for the week. We are back. We're here to wrap things up for the week. It is the final day of the Majority Report. Sam will be back next week. I am, for one, excited because doing this by yourself is hard for an extended period of time is hard. He's a machine. I don't really quite understand it, but
he's been actually doing dummy shows just during his vacation.
Yeah. We told him the camera's on, but it's not. We saying we're working the tech remotely, but we're not recording it. So let's get into this here. Joe Biden, President Biden. I don't know. It's like that weird thing Fox News does where they have to say the name of President Trump before to show I have some sort of respect. It's bizarre. But anyway, Biden. He had a back and forth with Fox News's White House reporter Peter Doocy, son of Steve Doocy from Fox and Friends. It was pretty tense, the lines of questioning, and Biden was visibly frustrated in this exchange. Let's take a listen.
You know as well as I do that the former president made a deal with the Taliban that he would get all American forces out of Afghanistan by May 1. In return, the commitment was made, and that was a year before. In return, he was given a commitment that the Taliban would continue to attack others, but would not attack any American forces. Remember that? I'm being serious. No, I'm asking you a question. Because before... No, wait a minute. I'm asking you a question. Is that accurate, the best of your knowledge? What?
I don't think that's the issue. Do you think that people have an issue with pulling out of Afghanistan or just the way that things have happened?
The way. So it looks like Biden was playing the harmonica there, but actually he was just so frustrated that he put his mouth and head in his hands, which I understand because this was a part of a larger exchange with Doocy, that he could not stop hammering this point home about just the way that we withdrew, right? And Biden knew he was going to take this because that's why he essentially said no other president has done it, because they knew they were going to take this line of questioning.
The problem that they have with the way we withdrew is that we withdrew.
Yep.
There was Trump. We'll play a Trump clip in the fun half where it's like, I had this great plan, we would have got everybody out there and no one would even notice. No, that's exactly not possible to start evacuating.
And that's why he pushed it off until after the election, because Trump knew this was going to happen. He knew that it was going to be chaos, and he knew he was going to take a hit politically.
And let's be clear what Trump really wanted. He wanted a secession, basically to look good going into the election season. He didn't really give a crap, I don't think, about the pullout. And so any deal with the Taliban was like, don't make me look stupid so I can beat Joe. And then once it happened, because the timing of this is also bad. If you read any Afghanistan war books, you know that the summer months are fighting months. So you're going to schedule the pullout right before the fighting season starts. All this stuff, the plan was as good as a plan for withdrawal from a dishonorable occupation could be, and this is the only way it can go.
Right. And so, of course, the outrage is only reserved for the withdrawal. It's only reserved for the way that we did it, not the occupation in and of itself. And why is that? Why is that? Why is it that a majority of Americans want to no longer be in Afghanistan, and yet Biden's approval on Afghanistan is now, I think, in between 20 and 30%? That's because the media, one, is complicit in showing them these images. But the images and what they represent to people, it's not, oh, we're so horrified about the violence. Because if they cared about the violence, they would have cared about the war on a consistent daily basis. And they would care about the outcomes of these drone strikes and the violence and the chaos that we have sowed and caused. They care about America looking bad. They care about big, strong America not displaying its might in an adequate fashion. They care because they see the images of us losing, because we are not the dominant, thumping superpower that we were told about in history class and as we sang God Bless America. That's what they care about. They care about the images of defeat and it hurting a collective nationalist ego. And that is not enough. to maintain a presence in the country, that is not enough to continue to occupy an area and continue to engage in warfare. It's just simply not enough just because your sense of nationalist pride isn't satiated. We lost. Stomach it.
Just a note on polling, like Biden's poll numbers might be down, but this is from a few days ago. From Forbes, some 45% of registered voters polled said U.S. should or probably should still withdraw, even though it provides opening for Al-Qaeda, while 40% said the possibility should remain. Support for U.S. withdrawal has risen over the past week, according to Morning Consult Political, after taking a hit as the Taliban quickly seized control of the country early next month. So I think just got to wait this period out, because this is going to go like Vietnam, where everyone realizes what a fucking disaster that was. I mean, certain sectors of military, like particularly people who wanted to get promotions from the occupation, are going to bitch about it to their CNN buddies, but it's good that we withdrew.
Oh, it's absolutely good that we withdrew. And a reminder that a lot of this is being driven by a generation that did not come of age, and that, of course, this is not everybody, right? We have people like Barbara Lee and Bernie Sanders who saw this from the get-go. But there are a lot of people who did not grow up and see clear-eyed what the Iraq War and the War on Terror was and the war in Afghanistan was, right? And this is not going to be the discourse forever. We have a whole group of people coming up who understand the war on terror for what it really is, and anti-war, anti-imperialism, anti-interventionism as a fundamental position, as an idea subset, as a policy concept. It's not going to be treated with the derision and unseriousness that the powers that be currently treated as, because it can't be. And so that's the glimmer of hope at the end of this. All right, guys. Have a great weekend, Peacock audience. We will see you on Monday. All right. Do we have Lance? Yeah, hold on one sec. Drop the F-bomb in the Peacock hour. It's all good, though. I mean, I haven't been, well, I say this all the time, but hard to remember being this enraged at a news cycle, and then I remember, oh, Israel-Palestine happened a few months ago. That whole thing was pretty tough. But do we have Lance? But, well, quickly before we do that, I want to ask, or we'll talk to him and then we'll plug Left Reckoning later. Okay. Lance?
It's connecting to audio now, so give him just a few seconds. Actually, I'm going to... Hey, Lance.
Hey, Lance.
I didn't know if I should be talking. Should I talk already?
Oh, yes.
You can
go
talk.
ahead.
We are right live. You are talking to all the majority report audience now.
Oh, I'm live. Sorry. I was told I was going to get I was going to be briefed or tested out or something. I don't know. I was going to be put through
wow.
We plan to do that, but it's Casual Friday, and we assumed you're always professional, so.
Yeah, we didn't.
So we assumed we could be less professional.
Awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. How's it going?
It's going well. How about you?
It's going all right. You might have to ignore some of the biting sounds. My little puppy is going to town on a bone behind me, but otherwise things are fantastic.
What's the puppy's name? Can't leave us hanging.
Oh, sorry, you just cut out there. I just saw something.
What's the puppy's name? You can't leave us hanging.
Oh, sorry, Chico.
Chico.
Little Chico. Yeah, we adopted him from Mexico.
Oh.
Oh, that's adorable.
He's really adorable. Well, I'm so glad that you're on today, Lance, because everyone should check out the Serfs. That's Lance's show. And nice t-shirt, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Very, very sweet. We wanted to talk to you a bit about the upcoming Canadian elections. I am admittedly ignorant about what's happening. I know a little bit, but we needed a true expert to come in and tell us about what's happening on September 20th, because that's just less than a month away, and there are significant ramifications. My understanding is that polling has kind of tightened in recent days when it comes to liberals v conservatives. So give us the lay of the land. Trudeau called for this election thinking it seemed to be like a slam dunk for him. It's not looking that way thus far.
Wow. I mean, for someone who said that you don't know much about the election, that was pretty much all I had to say. That's a good summary. Oh,
okay. See you later.
Yeah. I blew my one shot on the majority report to be the resident expert of anything. So for any of your viewers who don't know, Canada is not a made-up cartoon. It's a real country. It's just to the north of you. And we actually do a lot of cartoonish things. Like we have a parliamentary system here, similar to every other old colony. And we still have the Queen as our head of state, which is also kind of silly. But part of this parliamentary system and the way it works is that you basically don't get to vote for your prime minister. I don't get to write down that I want to vote for, say, Jagmeet Singh, who I would probably vote for had I been given the choice. What you do is you vote for your local MPs in your area, and then all the MPs kind of team up together, kind of like a Captain Planet style or Power Rangers or whatever metaphor you want. And then if you get enough seats, aka enough MPs, you get to form the government. The magic number is 170. So if you get 170 MPs in your party, then they form the majority government, and they can basically rule with an iron fist, which is what Trudeau got to do for a little while until he lost his majority government and has had a minority government. When you have a minority government, you have to either do deals with like-minded parties, and it actually works out a lot better because you don't have this kind of like either one party enacting not authoritarian, but as close as you'll get in Canada, unilateral rule. They have to work together with other parties, which kind of helps out. It's kind of the advantage, in my opinion, of a parliamentary system over kind of what you have in America, which is the two-party pendulum swing effect kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So what, I guess, what were the reasonings for Trudeau calling this election? It seems like probably it was based on the COVID response. Vaccination rates were high very quickly in Canada. You guys outpaced us, even though you were behind for quite a while.
I can explain that.
So explain that to me. Why did Trudeau call this election?
Power.
Yeah.
That's.
Yeah. But what? Okay.
I know it, but more.
What were the headwinds? Yeah, like was it the COVID response?
So basically, at the time, the polling and most of the, I would say, intelligentsia was showing that Trudeau is pretty poised to win a majority government within this small time frame. So one of the things about a snap election in Canada is, unlike the US, which is kind of just a perpetual election cycle, this whole thing, as you can tell, wraps up very quickly. Like it was announced and in a month it's going to be over. So Trudeau's idea was that right now we're doing very, very well for a lot of reasons. And unfortunately, not all the reasons are because of Trudeau. Once COVID started, basically Canada's answer to COVID was similar to a lot of other countries, where it's like, we need to lock down. You need to stay in your homes. Don't touch each other. No more, glory holes or whatever it is that you were doing. And what we should all do is just, stay indoors. And, if you can, work at home. If you can't, we need some safety net, some sort of a safety net, right? Similar to the one-time $2,000 checks that y'all got, and then the $1,400 checks after. So this is where having a parliamentary system works, because Jagmeet Singh and the NDP, they're basically the lefty party in Canada. They're the workers' party. They're typically very for unions, worker cooperatives, increasing pharmacare rights, dental care rights, stuff like that, stuff that all lefties kind of get on board with. They were the ones who pressured Trudeau and said to Justin Trudeau, hey, by the way, you need to enact this program. Canadians are going to need some form of a UBI to get us through this. That became what was known as CERB. So under that program for about 7 to 8 months, any Canadian who wanted would just log into a website. You wouldn't have to go through any vetting process. You just click, I agree, and you would get $2,000 in your bank account every month while COVID was going down. It obviously, it was incredible, saved a lot of lives. I had a lot of friends who were on it. And it was necessary, because how else are you supposed to spend hours at home not working and also buy food and pay rent, right? It doesn't work out. So that was an enormously popular program, which did very well for the Liberals, even though it was in large part due to the NDP forcing them to do that because they didn't want to. So that's one thing that he went into this election thinking, that's very popular. The second one being what Emma already mentioned, of course, is the vaccines. Now, Canada's beating America in the vaccine race isn't because of good old-fashioned smiles, maple syrup, or whatever the press has been telling you. It's entirely because of riches and greed. What Trudeau essentially did is realize we're a very wealthy nation. We no longer have a vaccine production capability in this country because conservatives gutted it years ago. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy it from wealthier nations, poor nations and wealthy nations. So we bought a whole bunch from you, America, but then we also bought a whole bunch from this global reserve, which is intended to be used for the poorest countries in the world, developing countries, to be able to get emergency vaccines in a case like this. We bought from that emergency pool as well, with the idea that we're not actually as evil as this sounds. We're going to replace them once we're all vaccinated, kind of thing down the road. But combined with all the sources and the fact that Canada is a wealthy nation, it's very oil wealthy, right? We just bought all the vaccines we needed and got everyone vaccinated.
So, how was that even possible? How was Canada even able to maneuver that and just say, oh, yeah, we'll put more in this repository later? Seems like that should be disallowed given, I don't know, GDP.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen globally that I don't think should be permitted that seem to be fine, depending on how much wealth and capital you can exude. I can't answer that question genuinely from a legal standpoint. I'm not sure. I'm assuming everything was above board. It wasn't done in secret. It was very public, and it was also one of those things where Trudeau was kind of like, I don't want y'all to feel guilty about any of these decisions. Sorry. Got a puppy running through my legs while I'm on live air. I don't want y'all to feel guilty about these decisions. I want y'all to just understand that we intend fully on helping out other nations and replacing these in due time once we have the ability to do so. But again, it's kind of like, it's all these things that were making Trudeau popular. He saw this as an opportunity to, like, it's a snap election called solely for the purpose of him getting a majority back, because he doesn't like to work with other parties. He doesn't like to work with the NDP. The NDP right now has been fighting him for months for things that seem on the surface level to be commonplace. Like, can we have more paid sick leave days? Can we have more mat leave days? Can we have more pat leave days? Can we please, like, the NDP proposed this proposal, and I'm sure everyone on the show will agree with this kind of idea. What if during this pandemic we have a situation where the richest Canadians have made an obscene amount of wealth, just like the richest Americans, just like the richest Europeans, just like every other billionaire onward has made an obscene amount of wealth? Can we tax them from now on at 1% for all their accrued wealth? And this is to the tune of anyone who makes more than $20 million or has more than $20 million in assets, we just tax them 1% to pay for the rest of the country, for the poorest Canadians, for the homeless Canadians, for those who are jobless, just for all the stuff we need right now under COVID. Does not seem controversial, right? And it was overwhelmingly approved of by Canadians. Canadians were like, yeah, this makes sense. If you have more than $20 million in assets, you should have to pay your fair share. And the Liberals shut it down. I mean, the Conservatives shut it down as well, but that goes without saying. But it's just one of those things like, Trudeau didn't want to keep putting up with these proposals where it makes Jagmeet Singh look very good. The NDP looks very good. They're like, yeah, let's tax the wealthy to pay for everybody kind of programs. He wants to have a majority again, basically.
So essentially, he wants to toe this line by taking credit for the policy sets that he was pressured into putting in place by the NDP, while also calling the snap election in order to neutralize them and take back a more moderate liberal majority. Yeah,
I would say that's a very fair condensed assessment of it. But I mean, if someone was here who was a Trudeau supporter, they'd probably be like, that's hogwash. Okay, there's so many more factors at play. But I mean, if you're just looking at a very Coles Notes version, that's what I would say is accurate.
Oh, there's a reason I didn't have a Trudeau supporter on the show, though, to talk about. So I appreciate your assessment. Let's talk a little bit more about Trudeau and his relationship with the Indigenous population in Canada, because I think that's gotten a lot of attention due to his green lighting of pipelines. And now here in the United States, we're talking about Line 3. Not enough. I want to talk about it more, honestly, because it's yet another instance of this prioritization of gas that's homegrown in North America, so we can reduce our dependence on Saudi oil by just supplementing it with our own, and tribal lands be damned, and rights of Native people be damned. That's been quite a controversy from the left in Canada. Trudeau hasn't reckoned with this in really any meaningful way, is my understanding. If you could talk a little bit more about that fight from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Trudeau has been an absolute wizard, I would say, at his ability to make it appear on the surface as if he's actually on board with a lot of popular causes. If anything, he's really good at taking populist movements and then absorbing them into this kind of corporate liberal machine to make it more sanitized. So he'll do press ops. Recently, there's been a bunch of discoveries of unmarked mass graves of children who died at residential schools in Canada, and he'll show up to them and he'll kneel and he'll lean on one knee and he'll place flowers or wear an orange shirt, and the tear will go down the face. And he's been doing this for as long as I've known Trudeau. He's very good at the optics of politics, whereas the actual policies themselves are usually pretty abysmal. While he's doing that, while he's kneeling on the one knee and while he's, the single tears going down the face for the press op, he has been actively suing residential school survivors in court in order to prevent them from getting what I would consider to be just dues for their treatment as survivors under this program, to the tune of $100 million. It's not a Dr. Evil figure. It's there's no joke there. It's horrifying, but that's what he'll do behind the scenes while publicly saying this is atrocious. How could we have committed cultural genocide? I'm so ashamed of my country, kind of stuff. He's got a really long history of doing those kind of things. Now, I don't want to completely 100% say that Trudeau has been abysmal for Indigenous rights. He has in fact been better than, say, some of his predecessors, and he has put a lot of stuff to the forefront. For example, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission started before Trudeau came into power, but the findings of the commission came out while Trudeau was in power. And if you don't know what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is, it's the largest study, academic study ever done. It was funded by the government. It cost millions of dollars to do. It interviewed thousands upon thousands of residential school survivors, as well as other academics and academia, ex-police officers, ex-nuns and priests, to find out what was the situation in the history of Canada and how did this affect the people. And the findings were what conclusively determined that this was in fact genocide. It came from their own words. And then here's a whole bunch of calls to action in order to change the course of history that we're going down. Very few of those calls to action have been implemented. And a handful of them could have been done under Trudeau. I think some of the worst ones was one of Trudeau's big campaign promises was to clean up all drinking water on reserves in Canada. So for those who aren't familiar, Canada has a reserve system for Indigenous peoples in which they'll usually take a whole bunch of different cultures and languages and entire societies, and they put them all, historically they would squeeze them all together in these small plots of land that were typically very far away from mainstream Canadian society. So they had a lot of difficulty finding jobs, obviously, because they were remote. They had a lot of difficulty with, obviously, drug abuse and alcoholism because the living conditions were deplorable. That added to the fact that the Canadian government was literally taking their children out of their arms and forcing them into schools where they were tortured, beaten, and sexually abused and stuff like that. So the whole thing is a mess, and it's almost entirely because of the actions of the federal government towards these people at the time. Taking that all in, Trudeau has a very good opportunity to make a lot of these situations right by improving the living conditions currently in today's day and age in reserves. There's still 54 reserves in Canada that don't have potable water, as in the drinking water in those areas cannot be drank without boiling or finding it from a third-party source, which you would think is something you would hear in a country that wasn't nearly as rich as Canada. And yes, it's an incredibly complicated topic to say how do you exactly fix that, but it's still something that was made as a campaign promise way back before he was even elected in his first run. So I mean, if in summary, if you were asking me what is Trudeau's relationship with Indigenous people, I would say it's very largely performative more than anything.
It seems that way. And you're right to heap all that criticism onto him and also say, well, he's been better than his predecessors. He's also been better than in the United States any president. We don't have any equivalent Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the residential schools we had here in this country. So the fact that he's fighting these survivors or the families of the survivors in court is unconscionable, but again, not necessarily something that we in the United States have like to stand on.
If I could just put one little pin in that thought, though, Trudeau didn't start the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. That was actually started before Trudeau took power. He just basically didn't fight the results of the findings, right? Whereas I would say Stephen Harper was actively working to suppress other things that were going on within Indigenous discovery at the time.
Well, gotcha. Okay, so bare minimum.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Then let's turn back to the election just a little bit. So the conservatives are gaining momentum, at least in polling. That's what it seems to be indicating. What are they proposing? What is their line of attack against Trudeau in the snap election?
So I both want to make people a little less afraid, because right now I'm getting a ton of emails from people saying, because our equivalent of Nate Silver over here in Canada is called 338. So if anyone wants to see the up and coming polls and projections, go to 338canada.com. But if you go there, you'll see at the very top, the federal vote projection, which means how people are going to vote federally, is showing the Conservatives and the Liberals at a deadlock heat, with the Conservatives starting to surpass the Liberals, which is a nightmare scenario for everybody, right? No one wants the Conservatives in power. I would rather the Liberals stay in power as a minority with the NDP to push up against them and make them more lefty. What you should be more worried about and concentrate on is the federal seat projection, because that's all that matters. So it's very misleading for people right now to be like, well, the Conservatives are taking the lead. If you look at the federal seat projection, which is all that matters, again, how many seats are people going to have? They still have the Liberals in a decided lead. So the Liberals are still projected to get 141, which is a minority, the Conservatives with 133, and then the NDP with 36.3. Obviously, the people who've done the best in this election so far have been the NDP. They've gone up a lot since their last election. But sorry, to answer your question, what are Conservatives proposing? The Conservatives are led by a man named Aaron O'Toole, and pause for jokes. All right.
Apt.
Yes. He's an odd fellow. He tried to do this thing where he was going to rebrand the Conservatives as being a little bit more progressive and as being a little bit more modern, and that backfired horrifically, because clearly they didn't want that. So he tried to make it part of the Conservative Party platform just to admit that climate change is real. Not that they are committing to doing anything about it, not that they are willing to say that, like, it's man-made or anything, but just to admit that climate change is real and active, and we should acknowledge that. That was one of his party proposals that did not go through, like in the last Conservative board. It's very strange. So he has tried to do this mix of modernizing them. And if you didn't know, Canada, because we have so many potential parties, we have a new one that started in the last election called the PPC. The PPC is Canada's answer to, I don't know, far-right anti-immigration sentiment-esque, if you could picture that in a party. They're like a splinter from the Conservative Party, but they're gaining a little bit of momentum. They have like 3.5% projected seats. So they're siphoning off some of the worst parts of the Conservatives, I guess, from the Conservative Party. Outside of that, the big plans that Aaron O'Toole's laying out are they're frighteningly populist. I will say that. He recently put something out there that I just immediately on the surface love the idea of, and that is that every major corporation in Canada, once they reach a certain size, needs to have a worker's voice at the CEO board, which is odd to hear from a Conservative party, and I'm sure you're all surprised. And then a whole bunch of academics in Canada looked into it and found out that the whole thing was purely ceremonial. Like, what he's proposing would mean that, like, once or twice a year, the workers would be able to sit at the CEO board, and that would be nice and fun. But the whole thing is like, show off your kids at kindergarten kind of thing. It's like, it doesn't mean there's any agreement towards they have to listen to them. There's no bargaining power. This could be done in lieu of, say, like unionization, in lieu of actually having worker bargaining power in the workplace. Instead, you just get to sit at the table once a year and be like, all right, so what do you think? How are you liking your job? And then you can be like, oh, well, we don't enjoy pissing and shitting in bags. That's kind of been terrible. So can we stop doing that? Like, oh, nice, neat. All right. Round of applause, everybody. Look, they did it. They did it. Great. All right. We'll see you in a year. Yeah. Thanks. Good. Nice to see you. Kind of stuff like that. Stuff that, like, really scares me, because you get that sentiment from people like Tucker Carlson, who are pushing for populist ideas. And the more I see that coming from the right, the more frightening it can become. So he's been a mix of that, a mix of we're going to build way more homes for Canadians, even though at the current measure, I think Canada has 6 empty homes for every person housed. So, I mean, the supply and demand is not as much of an issue as class and economics is. But yeah, typical Conservative stuff.
Right. And so for the NDP, where do they stand going into this election on the 20th?
So the NDP, and I'm going to have to admit to my bias here, because I'm working on the sidelines trying to get Indigenous NDP members elected. So I'm going to give a shout out to Breen Ouellette, who's one of the first Indigenous I think the first, if he gets elected, he'll be the first Indigenous MP from Central Vancouver. So I'm helping with this campaign on Saturday. The NDP have been very forthcoming about wanting radical and drastic change, especially at a time like now. Jagmeet Singh is the first MP to formally announce that their official policy is to end all oil subsidies, kind of like day one kind of thing. So there's not going to be any more subsidization for the oil industry in Canada, which would be massive, I mean, as soon as COVID started, I believe we gave the tar sands oil industry close to $10 billion in bailouts. I could be a little bit off on that number, but still, for a company that's already making record profits, entering COVID, you don't think that that's something that me as a taxpayer would want to put my money towards, but there it is. So that's one of the big things. Today, they promised universal pharmacare. And I know that might be odd to Americans to hear, but Canada does have a public healthcare system. We have the same one as you, Medicaid or Is it Medicare or Medicaid? Which one starts at 65? It's
Medicare,
Medicaid, right?
Medicare. Medicaid is for
seniors.
disabled. No,
Oh, okay,
Medicare
sorry.
is for seniors. Yeah.
Okay, so we have the same system, except instead of at 65, it starts at 0, which is basically the biggest difference, right? But it goes by the same name. But most people don't realize in Canada that it doesn't really cover the neck up. And by which I mean anything that happens to your mouth, there's no dental care. Anything that happens to your eyes, there's no eye care. And when it comes to mental health care, there's a very long waiting list typically. And then what will usually happen is if you have something extreme, like I've had friends who were schizophrenic, they will be seen immediately by a healthcare worker, but they'll try to just give them which drugs work and try to do that drug combination rather than let's sit you down with a counselor, a psychiatrist, stuff like that. So Jagmeet has come out and said that he's now going to push for full pharmacare programs. He's in the past tried to push for dental care programs, but they've been shut down by the Liberals for a variety of reasons. So he's going very strong into those, very pro-environment, very pro-worker. Yeah, it's basically most of the things you'd probably be looking for in terms of aligning yourself with leftist politics. Now, the criticism that you're probably going to get is that we have provinces in Canada the same way you have states in the US, and the provincial NDP is very different than the federal NDP. And the provincial NDP in where I live, British Columbia, has been abhorrent. Especially because there's now the deforestation going on in northern BC, as well as old growth forests, and they're being protected once again by Indigenous people. Usually seems that when it comes to the clash with the environment, it's Indigenous people who are at the front lines trying to protect it, and the NDP is just basically not respecting any of their sovereign rights or land back titles or stuff like that. So the BC NDP, I cannot vouch for them. They're pretty bad. The Alberta NDP cannot vouch for them. They're pretty bad. As of what I've seen so far, federally, Jagmeet Singh is the best option personally for me that I've seen. The next parties would be the Bloc Québécois. There's not much to say about them except they're separatists, so it doesn't really apply unless you are someone interested in separating and becoming your own autonomous country in Quebec. And then there's the Green Party, which it's weird because y'all have Green in the US, and the Green Party in the US sometimes is good. The Green Party in Canada is very strange. It's
the Green Party in the US is not that
mixed bag. Let's say.
Yeah, let's
Okay. Can you tell me a bit about the US Green Party, and then maybe I can see how it differs?
Well, it's not really a thing, and it's a lot of cranks who
the main
are disaffected.
The main problem is I have no problem against a third party, but the main issue seems to be it's focused as a media operation during presidential campaign season to run basically like presidential candidates and disregard any sort of more local power attainment and basically start at the top, which I think we've seen. Look, it'd be nice if it would have worked, but I think we've seen the outcome of that experiment at this point. Okay,
well, very similar. Well, I mean, their answer to a lot of the climate stuff has been very pro-capitalism, as in we can solve these issues if we just funnel more corporate power into green energy power, kind of options like that. And I'm not saying that there isn't it's like the climate disaster is such a multifaceted issue that you need to approach it from a variety of different means. But I'm just saying the Green Party is often bizarre in their approach to it. And as of right now, they're self-imploding. They've got a very big problem where there's a mix of racism, anti-Semitism, attacking their own elected leader and trying to get their own elected leader ousted. This is happening right before an election was called. So at the moment, the Greens are kind of in self-implosion mode. So I would say for tenable political parties. It's basically the big three right now. And like I said, there is that weird, super racist one that is funneling votes away from the conservatives at the same time.
Gotcha. Well, what do people need to know ahead of this election in terms of, strategy, what you'd recommend, just to wrap this up?
Sure. As of right now, the election is still pretty far away. I know Canada operates kind of like in dog years to human years in relation to the US. So even though it seems like it's very close and we got, a mere 23 or 24 days away from it or something like that, it's still a very long time in terms of election time in Canada. A lot is going to happen. What you're going to see is like giddy up. There's going to be a lot of scandals. They're all being kept close to the chest right now. It was I think it was 2 or 3 weeks before the last election where we learned about Trudeau's love for blackface. So he may have other proclivities that we're unaware of that will, see the light of day as the weeks come closer. But you're probably going to see that typical roller coaster that you're seeing right now, which is the Liberals will begin to sink and wonder, what did they ever do to deserve this? And at the same time, the Conservatives will rise, and then it'll become very scary because it's like, are we just going to lose the Liberal minority and trade it for Conservative minority instead? I would say if you want to be active in this, if you're Canadian, or even if you aren't, because this is something that definitely affects you. Canada is one of the world's largest oil producers. We produce an obscene amount of bitumen, especially from the tar sands, and it's one of the most destructive and wasteful ways to produce energy. So it's something that you want to get involved with, then please check out your local MPs. It's like anything else. It probably will make a lot bigger difference if you try to approach this election locally than if you try to approach it from the sum totality. Like I have to get Jagmeet Singh or Justin Trudeau elected. That's it. And if I don't do that, nothing's going to happen. Like at a local level, you could probably affect and this goes for all politics, really. You can affect a lot more change at a local level than you could at a large level. So yeah. And also please support all the Indigenous candidates who are running. Most of them are running for the NDP right now. And yeah, I'll be working with Breen Ouellette this weekend to try and get him elected as well.
Well, Lance from the Serfs, thank you so much, Lance. Really appreciate your time today, and everyone should check out the Serfs.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
All right, folks, we are going to head into the fun half now. 646-257-3920. I'm not sure if we're going to take calls today. I'm not exactly sure. But, oh wait, before we head in, Left Reckoning. Tell us about what's happening over there.
Yeah, Left Reckoning Wednesday night. The public show is available for folks who want to check it out. Chip Gibbons, civil liberties journalist, talking about Assange, Daniel Hale, also some Pentagon Papers release. I make him listen to some Nixon tapes with Henry Kissinger. And we also talk about, I think, the difficult balance to strike between the sort of historical observed pattern of the far right collaborating with law enforcement and against the left, and also our weird moment now where a lot of those sort of carceral, like the Fed, FBI, police, are looking at, well, particularly the FBI is touting the right-wing extremist threat as an expansion of their capabilities, which is not a good thing. So we talk about that. That is patreon.com/leftreckoning to get the post game, and we also have some members content this weekend coming out where I talk about when Tom Nichols at Radio Free Tom called me a snowflake because I said that McDonald's should pay more than $6 an hour, and the life experience you get being exploited by a corporation, McDonald's, doesn't compensate for that. So all that, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
What a cuck you are. All right, 646-257-3920. We'll see if we take calls. Maybe, Matt, we will crack open that beer. Oh, yeah. We said we were going to do that on Friday.
I think I'm going to.
There's an IPA in there. Just find that for me.
All right.
All right. 646. I already said this, but just so you know. Wait, we don't have time to take calls. I'm sorry, guys. I don't think we do.
I am, folks.
Yeah, I am. Thank you. See you guys in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We are back, and I have an India Pale Lager, which, like, I don't even know if that was... Ooh. Whoa. Did you turn on the mic to...
ASMR.
I have Stevie, the Belgian Golden Ale, Belgian Golden Strong Ale, sorry. It tastes like an IPA.
It does?
Not that I would know, but...
This kind of tastes like a lager, but it does have a little bit of hops. It's interesting.
But this is from Bulldog Beer Company. Do we know who sent us this?
No, we don't.
We know they sent it to us in a HelloFresh box.
Yes,
so
but thank you. Thank you, Mr. HelloFresh. And Bradley, who is remote, down at the beach. Hope that's not blowing up your spot, Bradley.
No problem.
I'd say what beach?
I have a 90-minute Imperial IPA from Dogfish Head. I just went to the mini bar because, I'm on island time.
There you go. Right. Well, Bradley's been blackout drunk this whole week. That's why we had all those technical problems yesterday.
Couldn't find my computer.
Yeah, right. But actually, no, this was kind of our end of the Majority Report week celebration. It's crazy. Like, I mean, I've said this before, but it takes a lot of stamina what Sam does to do this on his own. Like, I don't know if I could do it all the time.
Oh wait, I realized I'm muted now.
Oh, you're muted.
No, I'm not. Okay, so yeah, now I forgot what I was going to say because I'm one sip into a beer, but I was going to say something about Sam's work ethic, but it completely slipped my mind.
Oh, all right. Well,
but actually, I remember what I was going to be. This job isn't just the studio hours, right? Like, it's exhausting because at every hour you're like, oh, I could be preparing for that upcoming interview a little bit more and make it a little bit better, or I could enjoy my life, and that's attention that Sam apparently enjoys.
Yeah, Right, it's just like complete masochism. Yeah, because we have the pre-production in the morning, and then after that, I have the Peacock interview that I'm going to do, but like I'm not going to not enjoy our casual Friday, and I'll still have the Peacock interview, but I'll be fine. I won't finish this. All right, let's read some IMs. All right, can you go stand up and press the shofar button? We've got a bunch of shofars, because Sam would normally do it from over there, but he's not around. So, Ryan Cole, we're going to do shofars all back to back to back to back. Hey, for the first time ever, the show is live for my birthday. Can I get a shofar, or if Sam has locked up the soundboard like he does the lunchroom, make a horn or a fart noise or something? It's all good. We're about to get the real thing. Out of stamina. Can I get a shofar for my daughter's 7th birthday? Her name is Sunny Aloha, and she is my world. She started kindergarten before COVID hit and hasn't been back in person school since they first shut down 1.5 years ago. We're planning online schooling this year too because of the psychopaths who can't do a few simple things to help control this pandemic. And then thanks to MR Crew, you're much appreciated. Here is a shofar for Sunny Aloha. And my husband Fernando's 40th birthday today. He's a huge MR fan, says Scoodle Moose. Can he please get a shofar? Love you guys. Matt's drunk with power over there.
Don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining.
Ka-ching.
Say, baby, put down that pipe and get my pipe up.
Jesus.
Oh!
That one just goes, whoa. Jimmy Dore's cold sack. Emma's a fellow Giants fan. I'm curious who you hate more, Giants or Cowboys. It really just depends.
Eagles or Cowboys.
Oh, Eagles or Cowboys. Sorry, I misread that. It depends on the year. Recently, I hate the Eagles a lot more, and it's also just like, you know, I hate them after they tanked that game last year against Washington, which resulted in the Giants losing the division. And it's silly. Like, the Giants, and neither the Giants nor Washington should have made the playoffs. The division was just so ridiculous. But, like, the Cowboys are so incompetent and have been for so long. I wasn't even alive when they were, you know, in this dominant period. But as a rule, probably I hate the Cowboys more.
See, that's my primordial exposure to football. Was my dad was a big Cowboys fan in those
big
years.
Dominant years.
And
yeah.
I remember watching one of the Super Bowls. Like, the earliest football memory I have was being around a bunch of the men in my family. And one of the Cowboys players in the Super Bowl helped up one of the Bills players in the Super Bowl. One of my uncles like, "Don't help him up!" Like, just screamed at the TV because of some good sportsmanship. So
yeah. Man, they were really dominant, but like the issue is that right now Jerry Jones is not as good at managing a team as he thinks he is, and right now I just almost feel for Cowboys fans that Mike McCarthy is their head coach, so you got to deal with that more on. Although Nick Sirianni looks like a doozy, what an idiot.
Yeah, no, I don't hate the Cowboys. I like when they have really dominant receivers for some reason. There's something satisfying about like Des Bryant when he was really good.
Yeah. Well, you can't hate Des Bryant.
It's badass. I think there's something about the Cowboys. Like, I also don't hate the Yankees. Like, I like the evil empire teams a little bit when they can actually play the role.
I'm shocked, Matt.
That I'm a Cowboy. I'm not a Cowboys fan, but I don't mind them. To be honest, I don't really hate. I'm not invested in football enough to really hate any team. I think I'm trying to think of who would come to mind. No, like I'm an enlightened.
Do you like
fan
the Patriots? I respect what the Patriots do, for example. Like, I respect the excellence.
So where I come down is I can hate an ownership group. So like that is a reason why I dislike the Cowboys a little bit. Like, I always see Jerry Jones be disappointed, or a Schneider in Washington, and. Yeah, I mean, that's also another thing that's disappointing about Green Bay, that because their ownership theoretically should be the one that I like the most, and doesn't seem to be delivering very well.
Yeah, it is easy to hate an ownership group for sure. There are some really, really vile owners in sports, but I don't have a ton of legs to stand on as Rangers and Knicks fan, because Dolan is as vile as it gets.
I secretly like, I don't know if you're familiar with Free Darko Nathaniel.
Yeah, I love him.
But he has a concept called enlightened fandom, which is like you basically root for players.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
why you like the NBA so much. Probably,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I love it like for that reason, because I think it shouldn't be about the team.
I mean, look, like the Giants in terms of ownership, it's like family owned, and they bought it back in the early part of the 20th century. It at a horse race, like that's as kind of ethical as it gets in terms of ownership, the Maras. And I appreciate that they treat their players with respect. In terms of sports owners, the only fan I'm like, they're easier, like them and the Steelers are really family run, and so that's kind of easier to stomach. But I agree, and like I'm trying to translate that a little bit to the NFL. Like I'll root for Aaron Rodgers wherever he goes. I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers fan. I root for Odell Beckham wherever he goes. Other players like that who I just genuinely like as people, I'll root for them. So yeah, people feel like, people don't realize Odell Beckham was a beloved member of the Giants, beloved by the staff, beloved by his teammates, and that's a story for a different day.
He danced too much.
Yeah, he was a little bit too much of an individual, and people didn't like it, as he set records and was on pace to be the greatest receiver of all time if he didn't have to carry the whole team on his back because Eli Manning couldn't throw the football.
Also, most importantly, doing one-hand catches, which are awesome.
Yeah. OBJ's CryptoPunk, because you asked Emma, and I had a perverse curiosity. I'm among the unfortunate who did watch House of Cards to the end. In short, Foghorn died in office but off screen. He had made scheming wife VP, so she's president, and she continued to scheme on her way to re-election. She even murdered a lover who had goods on her, and yes, killing him while she engaged in coitus. Still, Robin Wright never did win her Emmy.
Spoiler!
Did she kill the guy from a Mickey from Boardwalk Empire, who ended up just like being like a really smooth in that show? That was a big departure, but anyway. Simple Socialist, I think a major part of why reactionaries flock to alternative treatments is that in a modern neoliberal America, the only way to have been coordinated to exercise any sort of agency is through consumption, and that coupled with an erosion of any sort of trust in government by the scaling back of any government resources, and the fact it's being pushed by said government for free really explains this issue, much like Brandon said yesterday. It just highlights that the social problems in America are extremely deep and don't have any short-term one-size-fits-all.
That was extremely well put, and it's one of my favorite concepts, which is how Americans are only ever empowered as consumers. And so the idea that like hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin, that you just need to be a smart enough consumer and you can actually get around this thing is... I mean, that is as American as apple pie.
Yep. Koosh, Army Corps of Engineers has a decentralized power structure that will make it difficult for interagency pressure towards Line 3. Hopefully, the new review process will be handled by a team that is interested in restorative environmental indigenous people's justice. I hope so. Biden is currently pushing for drilling on public lands in Alaska, so I don't have a ton of hope for that kind of being turned over.
Yeah, and we talked about Line 3 in also Dakota Access and the Keystone on Left Reckoning this week. The thing to know about Line 3 is it's in large part, it's like the idea that we need I think some people know that it's supposed to quote-unquote replace a pipeline, right? But really, this is about old, dying, dirty infrastructure, and oil companies wanting to abandon that infrastructure and just get right of way to build new stuff before they clean up the damage to the old stuff. And of course, the damage local to the pipeline and also to our climate in general. And so, like, there's this framing that I think the oil companies like, which is that like, oh, these indigenous sovereignty activists are getting in the way of new shiny things, and really they're stopping new dirty things getting put in, so they can like destroy, for instance, the wild rice habitat of Minnesota, which is just, I mean, just horrible that we would bring pipelines anywhere near that. And it's also the case that like these new pipelines, you'll hear these sort of comforting sounds about how this is the most studied pipeline ever, and we know how to build these things now. The Dakota Access Pipeline from 2017 to 2019 had a false alarm problem at like about 5 or 6 of its stations, reporting to 5 or 6 of its stations. And how many false alarms do you think over a 2-year period would be enough to sort of be a problem for your alarm system? You don't need to guess, because the actual number is 9,500. So that's the alarm system for the Dakota Access Pipeline. That's how
over how many?
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years. So
it's basically not like having an alarm system, because it's just completely malfunctioning and setting off alarms at all times.
All right, I'm bad at math. 9,500 over 2 years. Hold on, 365 times 2 equals
about 4,750 per.
730. This is good broadcasting. So that's like 100 over 130 a day alarms.
Yeah. So just guess which one of those is actual problem, and we'll be fine.
Yeah. All right. Brendan Stand for life. If you guys are interested, there was a dude on Tucker who says he hates Biden and the administration as much as the Taliban. Les, Emma, good job this week. Ask listeners to call the White House to encourage Joe Biden to continue the withdrawal. Come shower with Crowder.
I just want to say quickly, I hate the GOP more than I hate the Taliban.
Wow.
That's a stone cold fact.
I do too.
It's not even really a discussion, I think, just in terms of the global footprint of evil.
Yeah.
It's not even close.
Yeah, you're right. En Buerna. Ivermectin is a millenarian magic totem, a promise of a substance which will purify you magically of the societal rot around you. Okay, gotcha. 10 lawn gnomes. Not only is it a drug for horses, it's also a drug for horses you have to pay for. The vaccine is free. We made that point a little bit earlier. Bobby Dog, especially after this week doing the show on your own, it's clear that this is truly the crew to meet this moment for Majority Report. I hope you all take criticism in stride, continue to grow, and stay sharp. We've got your back. You occupy a unique place in this movement. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's very nice. We'll read a few more and then we'll get into some clips. Bear Thaw Me Too. Lance and Canadian politics are a perfect round out to Sam's vacation. Father of homunculus. Don't let it ever be said Emma doesn't do the least she can do. Are you talking about us drinking beer in the funhouse? Perhaps, and that's fine.
That's doing the most, I think.
I think we honestly, I think that's good broadcasting, as I said before.
Some of the great broadcasters of all time are drunk when they're on there.
Well, I mean, those were some of my favorite memories coming on TMBS.
Like Drunk O'Reilly and stuff like that?
Yeah.
And also just all of us being drunk.
Right, that's kind of what I was referring to. And Buerna, please put this Emma intro rant clip on YouTube. I think it is very helpful. I'm sure we will.
It'll be there.
Les, Emma, good. Oh wait, we already read that one. Come shower with Crowder. It took a week, but I finally missed that boomer's voice in my ear. Emma, you've done an incredible job with MR and Ring of Fire. You're such a great addition to the show, and I've listened for more than a decade. That's really, really nice. I appreciate it. Aaron is not cool. Excited for the Call of Duty game where they whitewash all our crimes as cool, and Dick Cheney gives us black ops missions. Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's get into some sound then. So, this Jenna Ellis clip. Let's tee this up. So, Jenna Ellis, the Giuliani lackey and just Trump orbit lawyer, was on Newsmax yesterday talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal. And she had some curious commentary that could have applied to her former boss, but she's selectively and knowingly applying this criticism just to Joe Biden.
Well, usually I'm not a vocal advocate for Kamala Harris, but hopefully she at least has all of her wits about her, which clearly Joe Biden does not. So I would say that Kamala at this instance would be better at least than Joe Biden. But we also know that Biden isn't the one pulling the strings. He's not making the decisions in Washington. And hopefully, if Kamala Harris did ascend to the presidency, with Biden either resigning, being removed, any of those constitutionally appropriate alternatives, she would at least be a vocal advocate and stand firmly for America. I mean, I think we also have to ask the question, Carl, at what point does this negotiation and really cooperation with the Taliban rise to the level of treason under the U.S. Constitution? I think that's a fair and an open question. If Joe Biden isn't willing to say that the Taliban are evil, they're our enemies, at what point is he actually providing aid and comfort, which is the definition of treason? I think that there are a lot of questions on the table that we should be very careful about asking, but we absolutely need to ask when we have someone in power in the highest office in the land who is clearly not making
that they just left billions of dollars of U.S. equipment and arms that would be aid and comfort to a terrorist organization. If he knew they were there, like the classified State Department cable said, that this could happen, did he aid them?
All right, well, so firstly, she says that Biden, obviously, he doesn't have his wits about him. He is not stable, and he's being controlled by other people. So is it an issue that he's not stable? Like, why do you care if he's not the ones making the decisions as president, if he's, being manipulated by people behind the scenes who are in his orbit? Like, by the way, as if Trump wasn't one of the most easily manipulated presidents of all time. The guy had no cohesive world understanding, and so he was able to just be pushed to do whatever the powers that be wanted him to do things. It wasn't that hard. Matt, did you want to say something?
I mean, just the way they project and repurpose previous arguments for their own work, like the way they've been using Big Lie, for instance. But like this idea that we're going to use there was a lot of in the resistance liberal during the Trump administration talk of this guy's crazy. Let's use some sort of
constitutional authority to remove him,
and they're just repurposing that. But it's also when Ronald Reagan, there are so many stories of him just being completely tuned out, and in just psychologically like impossible for him to just assigned to dementia, just being super apparent and covered up by the media. So it's a problem that happens in a country that continues to put very old people in the highest executive position. I think that deploying it here in Biden's withdrawal is just absolutely disgusting, though. Like, clearly this withdrawal is not going bad because Biden's old. It's going bad because the occupation was bad, and there's no good way to exit a bad occupation.
Of course, but that's like the through line that they return to with frequency, is that Biden is not able to conduct the duties of the presidency because he doesn't have the same kind of handle on his speech that he once did. But there's really no other indication that Biden is not comprehending things. We're not hearing any reports as such. And in terms of rational decisions, there's nothing more rational than what he is doing right now. We obviously here at the Majority Report are in full support of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And you know what? If Trump had been doing this, Jenna Ellis would be in full support of it, because she mentions that working with the Taliban should be treasonous. Trump did that.
Yeah, Trump did that to get them to just settle down a little bit so he could look good going into an election.
Yeah, and he waited for this withdrawal deadline to be after the election because he knew that this was going to be the outcome, and it was going to be a political difficulty for him. And so Ellis is just being woefully ignorant of that very fact. We've gotten into it a few times on Twitter. I'm saying it's not personal, Jenna Ellis. I think you're a horrible person, independent of our personal interactions. But, like, Mike Pompeo released thousands of Taliban fighters as a part of a deal that he brokered with the Taliban. There's a photo of him with the Taliban. If people want to look it up, they can. But she says this to a Newsmax audience that's not going to look it up. And she knows what she's doing. So, you know, okay, I'm going to be completely cynical and counterfactual. It achieves my ends. So that's all she needs. What a weirdo.
We should maybe do the Kinzinger clip too in this context, where he says that both presidents own the thing. I think we should.
All right, cool. So Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger was on CNN yesterday, and he's blaming Trump and Biden.
He's a never Trump guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's a Republican. But, you know, I am immensely disheartened that a good section of this country is consuming CNN on a regular basis when it comes to this very topic. That's like what you can draw a direct line to in terms of Biden's approval rating on Afghanistan dropping, because it has been nonstop hammering of the disaster that is this withdrawal, when, as we have mentioned multiple times on this program, the withdrawal would have always been a disaster because the war was the disaster, and this is what we have reaped because of the bloodshed that we have caused and the destabilization. Here is Adam Kinzinger with Aaron Burnett yesterday.
But look, both people bear blame here. And I know in such a tribal moment that we live in, we can't fathom that both Republicans and Democrats could bear blame because each side's busy pointing at the other. But Donald Trump set up a deal, you know, that would make Neville Chamberlain blush as he's out there saying, you know, that this war's not worth it. We're going to leave. My goal is to leave. It's an endless war. Then he empowers Pompeo to go negotiate a deal in that context. Pompeo negotiated a bad deal. They weren't following the deal, the Taliban. They weren't ceasing attacks. They still went forward as if this deal was working. And then after he got out of his office, he even as recently as a month ago said, I boxed Joe Biden in. At the same time, Joe Biden, who has reversed a lot of Donald Trump's stuff, including Nord Stream 2 sanctions and things along that line, made the decision to leave. He owns this decision as much as Donald Trump and the execution. I just think both Republicans and Democrats have failed the American people.
Yeah, so this is what I'm talking about. This is anti-democracy rhetoric. So first of all, Neville Chamberlain is appeased Hitler.
Yeah.
So I don't really know if he would blush by negotiations with the Taliban. I think he would actually probably think like, oh, the Taliban's not quite
This is small potatoes compared to my negotiations with Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, and like both parties should bear the blame thing, of course, on a very basic sense. That's true. They're all complicit in this. But you have to be careful when a certain type of person says that, because what they're saying is the military deserves none of the blame for this. But if you actually look at, you know, the things we were saying about Biden 10 years ago when Obama was in office, about how the military just gives, oh, we want more troops or many more troops. Those are the options that we're giving you. Like the military is absolutely every bit as complicit as the parties are in this. And like having people like McMaster or like the CNN mouthpieces do laundry for this occupation is it is really infuriating.
Well, he's trying to do the Seth Moulton thing, and the Republican congressman who I'm blanking on his name, who also went with him to Afghanistan, right? Like
Peter Meyer.
Sorry?
Peter Meyer.
Peter Meyer, right? We are veterans, and we have the very specific knowledge subset that allows us to be above these kinds of political whims, which is, as you say, quite dangerous. And he mentions that this is a bipartisan problem. Both presidents, Biden and Trump, deserve blame. I will one-up you, Kinzinger. Yes, both parties do deserve blame. And now I'm going to say 3 presidents deserve blame. George W. Bush, Obama, a Democrat, see, I'm bipartisan, and Trump, because they didn't withdraw from Afghanistan.
Yeah, they didn't shackle the military and tell the generals to shut the fuck up about it. Like,
yeah.
That's what they should have done, and that's why they deserve blame.
Yeah, they deserve blame for listening to people like you, whose only conclusion to every fucking thing is more troops, more bloodshed, more intervention, more power for me and my ilk, more unfettered power to do what we want to brown people around the world, and so that we can flex our muscle and say, oh, we are the greatest in the world. And there's no way that we are going to just let a massive loss change our worldview. It's just going to be the same conclusion every time, and nothing should stand in the way of that. Not the whims of politicians like Joe Biden, who deserves such blame for this. Not the whims of the people, the politicians who were elected by the people. We need to be, and I know Kinzinger is a politician now, but he's speaking for the military.
He's an
in this instance.
yeah, absolutely. Like Kinzinger is a politician that wants a military dictatorship, just like Jim Sciutto and Aaron Burnett and every general that they interview about this stuff. Like, that's what this is. Like, this is the path that they're trying to lead people down. And that might sound a little bit extreme, but I'm sorry. Like, you don't. Look at Brazil, just to the south. Like, they literally have a whole bunch of people in that country that want a return of the generals. Like, we don't have that history here, thankfully, but there is a appetite for it among a lot of people, including powerful people in the media.
And they may be fine with, okay, in terms of domestic policy, we want to talk about healthcare, we want to talk about, college or education or any of these whims that affect, that go back and forth via presidents, the tides go in, tides go out thing. Like, that's fine. You can have those petty debates, but we as kingmakers of the globe, spreading America everywhere, that needs to be unchecked, and it should be. That's the bipartisanship that they're interested in, and that's why he's frustrated with, like, Biden here and pretending that it's just a Trump problem too. For his own interest, because he's one of the anti-Trump Republicans.
There's a question in the chat that I think we should just respond to. What options do you think the military should give? It was never the job of the military. It doesn't convince the people, build schools, blah, blah, blah. That's on you, the civilians. The problem with that is if you look at, say, the Iraq and Afghanistan occupations, that the military was entirely involved in perverting the understanding we have of these conflicts and what we should do about them. From the very beginning, they took it as a part of the mission to co-opt the media. So no, we don't get to blame the civilians. It's the military that needs actually way more of a hit in this period than even civilian leadership, in my opinion. And it's not happening. And that's what really frustrates me. Like, look, the Democrats are going to hit the Republicans for it. The Republicans are going to hit the Democrats for it. All that stuff is in hand. And what's not going to be addressed is this absolutely evil monstrosity that we've been inflicting on other countries around the world.
Right. Gonna read some IMs, maybe do a little bit more clips. Packer Craze. Hey, I'm a majority Hey, I'm majority crew. I said repew as in reporting crew. I've got somewhat disheartening anecdote to share. I ended up being the only person of the 6 in my family living together who as of now is vaxxed. One of the others is currently too young for it, but the other 4 are eligible, but have outright refused to get it. Notable in the last few weeks, all besides me and the ineligible young one have now had COVID scares, including the 3 testing positive, 2 making an urgent care trip, and all showing some levels of symptoms in that time. I'm so sorry. While they are all recovered and recovering fine as of now, it sticks out to me that among the 4 refusing the vax to this point, 1 is a high school teacher with a PhD and 2 are just entering the nursing field. Other is someone years older, or other is someone years deep into Trump, Newsmax, etc. rabbit hole and only getting deeper, sadly. Feels like a grim reminder of how pervasive individualistic / anti-intellectualism thinking is becoming. All I can say is it seems the vax has, as expected, worked for me. The one who can't get it yet has luckily managed not to get sick somehow, and maybe now that everyone else here has been directly affected by it, they'll change their tune and get the vaccine too. Thanks all. Great job without Sam this week. Left is best. I'm really sorry to hear that. Yeah, I don't even know, but I will say anecdotally that I know people in my family who are anti-vaxxed who, now that Delta has come, and also they were on this like full FDA approval thing, they're a lot close. They're gonna get it, I believe. So yeah, it is scary though. and they're getting advice from a physician who like is pro hydroxychloroquine. So like I don't even know what you do in that instance.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah.
That's why these guys say talk to your doctor, because they're hoping that
they might get one that's
you might get someone who tells you what you want to hear.
That's the irony of the clip we played about Prager,
right?
The other day is that some of those doctors know exactly about or nearly as much as Prager does, which is bad information.
Right.
They know nothing about COVID except everything about COVID.
Yeah. Imran, I am disappointed to see AOC and the squad stay largely silent in war hawks and the military-industrial complex in Afghanistan. Where are they?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't lump all the squad, particularly Ilhan, because Ilhan's, as far as I know, the only one who said anything.
Ilhan's coming out about pardoning Daniel Hale. I mean, she's always at the forefront of these things.
Yeah, and I mean, we frankly, like, that's the thing is, like, the squad is the current makeup, like, if it just stays like this, it's not going to pressure even the other members of the squad to go out on limbs on certain things like this. We need, frankly, more people than we have right now. We need more Ilhans, particularly in terms of the imperialism stuff.
Yeah. Spy trans. Horse medicine? Thanks. I'll stick to ketamine. I've never tried ketamine, but I have heard nice things from people who have. I don't plan on it, but just like, yeah, the whole this is for animals thing, just a big turn off for me in terms of any.
I mean, look, there will be certain people that say it does have a human application for parasites.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And that there are, like we said about hydroxychloroquine, there are physicians who were prescribing it, which again, like I actually doesn't bother me a whole lot if a doctor prescribes something to say like, hey, maybe this could work, especially early in the pandemic when we're throwing everything against the wall and there's no vaccines available. But ultimately, it's just very clear that it got, just like hydroxychloroquine, turned into a vehicle for the same type of people who want to act like they're the ones that are being silenced to basically kill their audiences with bad medical information.
Right. All right, let's play this Trump clip. Let's see if I have it here. So Donald Trump went on Sean Hannity's program to talk about the response and the withdrawal from Afghanistan, blaming a bunch of people, including people that he hired. Because that doesn't apparently reflect on him whatsoever. They're very stupid, and that's why I hired them.
The best people guy.
The best people. I hired the best people, the people who are very stupid and who got us into this mess, and we should not be listening to them. And they were not stupid before I hired them, but they're stupid now.
For September 11th.
But you had got to the point where you felt it was safe enough, that you could have a withdrawal in such a way that you're leaving in place the pieces where the Afghan army and enough air support that they would be able to keep the peace, keep control, and keep the Taliban at bay. You did make adjustments to your policy.
No, I had it set up so perfectly. It was done so well. We were all ready. Everything was good. We had the Taliban totally frozen in place. They weren't going to move. And that's when I made my move. But, you know, we rely on stupid people like H.R. McMaster, John Bolton. Some of these people were really stupid people. I mean, Bolton was involved in getting us in with Bush into the Middle East. What? But you rely on people. Fortunately, whether it's Fauci or them, I don't listen to a lot of people if I think they're bad ideas. But we have a lot of very bad and very, the only thing I can think, not very smart people giving advice. But we were set up, and it didn't have to be hasty. What I said is exactly right, because we didn't have to go quickly, because we had them frozen in place. They weren't going to move. And Abdul, as I like to call him, Abdul was just going to wait us and just...
Abdul? Is his name Abdul? Abdul, as I like to call him?
Is Abdul a Taliban general, or who's... I don't even know who he's talking about.
I don't know either, but, like, I love the fact that his name is probably Abdul, but it's Abdul as I like to call him. yeah, pretty sure that when you hired John Bolton as your national security advisor, he had already gotten us into the wars that he described there. So I don't know why Sean Hannity, journalist at Fox News, didn't really follow up with that very obvious question. He must have just been distracted. But H.R. McMaster, we played earlier in the show, total hawk himself, John Bolton, cartoonish, bloodthirsty hawk, who, if he had had his way with Trump, would have gotten us into a war with Iran. But, you know, completely no follow-up. Both people were his... He says, I don't take advice from stupid people. They were your national security advisors. First H.R. McMaster, and then you replaced him with John Bolton, the very guy that you talked about as not having the right temperament for an advisory position because he's a stupid person because of the history of his getting us into conflicts that very much preceded your hiring of him. Like, we talk about how stupid Trump is. What else can you say at this point? It's pretty apparent.
From the perspective of if all you were interested in was withdrawing from Afghanistan, there's a possibility that a Trump then Biden administration combination is the only way we would have got that done. Because I'm not 100% certain that Hillary would have made plans for withdrawal in her first term, and I am even less certain that Trump would have carried on with his plan for withdrawal after he had won re-election and the media started turning on it. Like when people like Dan Crenshaw say unleash the might of our military, like I don't know necessarily that Trump can ignore those sorts of people so much, and that's why like people like John Bolton and H.R. McMaster got onto his into his administration in the first place, because that's who he's listening to.
Well, that's the point. Is like, Biden is being really stubborn in a great way in not caving to the pressure from these very military and Langley folks who probably want us to remain in, not just remain in Afghanistan, but expand our reach elsewhere. Trump doesn't have that ability. He's intoxicated by the idea of like the biggest bomb, like the biggest win. He dropped the mother of all bombs.
I did the Moab. What more do you want? I think that should have solved everything. That should have killed all the bad guys.
The guy who's obsessed with his hand size is probably pretty obsessed with the biggest response possible, the biggest amount of bloodshed. And so, of course, his commentary on this is entirely incoherent. The fact that Biden is essentially following his timeline for withdrawal does not enter the conversation. The fact that the very people he's saying are too stupid to speak on this topic were direct hires of his, that doesn't enter into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, who are the smart people? You've showed us all these dumb people. This is a parade of dummies.
Just like I said, what I said was very smart.
We're gonna hire all the best people, and by which I mean you're gonna hire me, and then.
But he doesn't want to work for anybody, so he's not able to be hired.
Yeah, I only fire.
Right. Yeah. Don't you know? I already told you that John Bolton was a big dummy when I said you're fired.
Like honestly, his relationships are basically decided by poll numbers of people like John. Like John Bolton's underwater by 40 points. What the fuck did we let him in the administration for? Oh wait, and then he'll do the top line of why people don't like him, even if it's like ideologically not part of his sort of suite of things he believes. So like, oh, he's a war hawk? I hate those.
Yeah, I forget. Anti-interventionist. If you saw those old clips of him just opining about the war on Howard Stern or on whatever Fox News program he called into about the Iraq war, it's just... Or maybe it wasn't Fox News at that point. He was still kind of towing this liberal line. He calls in, he goes, well, just you got to make a decision either way. Are we going to go in or are we going to go out? And it's just so stupid that we haven't... I really lost it there. But it's so stupid that we haven't made a decision. And then he uses that as, oh, well, I was right the whole time. All it was him calling on the Bush administration to make a choice.
Yeah, and there's a comment in the chat that says surrender isn't a deal. And au contraire, it is a deal.
Yes.
Particularly when you lose in a war/occupation. And the deal was let us exit without embarrassing us too terribly much. And particularly before we start exiting, don't create any amount of violence that would cast doubt on this. And that was the deal, and we're seeing how well that. And first of all, you need to make deals. The only way to stop this is to get it out of the realm of the only people being empowered in the situation are warlords. And that's why, for instance, you see collaboration, not just in how to end the U.S. occupation between the U.S. and the Taliban, but also how to fight ISIS there. Because it turns out that decades and decades of civil war juiced by major great world powers funneling guns into it is not a way to create peace. And this is known not only by like left-wing activists, but by the Rand Corporation, who did a study for the U.S. military saying, hey, actually, military occupation isn't going to solve these problems, and it really never has. So there's no precedent for thinking that a continued occupation here is going to make Afghanistan more peaceful. And that's just known, like I said, not by left-wing activists, but by the people that the Pentagon pays to inform them about the world.
Right. All right, we're going to read some IMs and probably just get out of here. Unless you have a pet project clip you want to get to.
No, I don't think so.
No. Oliver Wendell Holmes Slice. As a lawyer, I believe the Supreme Court's decision re the eviction moratorium is unfortunate but correct and necessary. For the last 40 years, there has been a constant expansion of presidential power via unitary executive theory, war powers, etc. that desperately need to be checked. The Supreme Court here drew a line, albeit in a weird place, I think you mean, and that is a net positive. They also basically gave a long, hard stare at Congress, like, do your fucking job. I'm sorry, I don't agree, because the only way to roll back the expansion of presidential executive power is for there to be...
is Congress, not the judicial system.
Right, because the reason that they made this decision in a weird place, as you say, is because it affected capital. And they will do that consistently unless there is an infrastructure in place to limit executive authority unilaterally. This is not going to encourage the limitations of executive power in general. It'll limit it in terms of things that help poor people. That's what it will do, especially with the makeup of this court. So I don't agree, but I appreciate you writing in. Keister, tuning in late. I hope my call from Wednesday was not misconstrued. Tebow was simply a great college quarterback. I am not a fan. Don't worry, you came off great. And my beliefs are opposite of his. I miss you on TYT, Emma, but you were doing a great job on Majority Report. Same goes with Matt Leck and the rest of the crew.
Yeah, I don't think Tebow's beliefs or personality are relevant at all. I think the main story, if you're speaking as a leftist, which, again, you don't always have to do, but in terms of this show, the point about Tim Tebow, I think that's most important to stress, is that he was exploited by a cartel during his prime earning potential years when he was the most valuable to capitalists, and he didn't get to earn any money from that. So, like, what happens to a 20-year-old that goes through that situation and can kind of maybe read the tea leaves that he's not going to be an NFL star? I give people a certain amount of leeway for that.
Louis Gomer, co-crusader. Matt, I'm going to challenge your assertion that we don't have a history of the generals being in charge. Washington ring a bell? Grant, Eisenhower?
Well, I mean, the thing with Washington is he famously decided that he should give up power and go try to monetize the Ohio River Valley. So, like, that's why Cincinnati is called Cincinnati, is because Cincinnatus was the famous Roman general who could have probably taken more power but didn't. And that was the lesson from Washington. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. And Andrew Jackson, of course, being the Indian killer war hero, so-called, that he was. It's definitely true that it happens here, but it's like, I'm sorry, compared to Brazil, where you can walk down the street and just put a mic in front of people's faces and they can say, like, actually, I think the solution to all this Bolsonaro Lula stuff is just put the military back in charge. It's a difference.
Yeah. Apazi, having a drink out here at work with y'all. I appreciate the work you do. Started watching around the 2020 election, and I'm so happy you helped me realize others felt similar politically. Great work, Emma. Or good work, Emma, sorry, and have a great weekend, team.
One final note about that, the Supreme Court decision on the evictions. There's a piece by Matt Carpenter-Jacobin, how Abraham Lincoln fought the Supreme Court. And I guess the fundamental takeaway for me is that this Schoolhouse Rock version of the separation of powers where Congress, the executive branch, and the judicial branch all have equal power, and they can they create like harmony and everything like that, is bullshit. The judicial branch particularly absolutely needs complete reform and overhaul, and to be put in its place, quite frankly, compared to democracy. And the fact that we have unelected people deciding these things it's not right. It's not good for anything. It's a bad precedent.
Mind Pillow Guy, the most messed up part about the ivermectin being given to inmates in Washington County Jail in Arkansas is that the inmates didn't know they were being given it. The medical team just handed them a handful of pills, telling them they were antibiotics and vitamins. That's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest shit. When the inmates asked if they were being given ivermectin, the medical staff told them yes, and only then could they refuse it. The inmates don't get to have a second medical opinion, obviously, so this quack physician was acting with impunity until they were caught. Also, will Sam still be on vacation over the weekend? How much longer should Kissinger be worried? Yeah, I would imagine he still is. Right-wing Kowalski from Nebraska. Once again, the liberal media is trying to get us to take an experimental vaccine that has been taken by hundreds of millions of suckers across every age, racial, and every other demographic group over a tried and tested miracle drug with the only side effect of blindness or death if you take too large of a dose, like a dose for a horse that would be on the label. In agricultural news, the new food stamp wealth giveaway from hardworking people to minorities will both bankrupt and destroy the government and empower the government to control the poor. Real farmers would rather go bankrupt than the poor paying us indirectly for a basic human need. It is just humiliating. Weather-wise, everything is fine. We've had droughts, floods, and hurricanes throughout all of history. And if you were concerned about so-called climate change and sea level rise, why are the rich, with their massive fortunes they can afford to lose, buying beach houses that are covered by flood insurance, backed by the power/failing government, which will be underwater in 30 years? Trump won, libs destroyed, God bless Annex Canada. It's pretty funny. Adam from LA, where do you see the GOP in the next 4 to 8 years? They have already turned on NatSec and put that fervor into local power like cops. How does that play out with the capital class, like banks and CEOs? They'll come back to the GOP eventually.
Yeah, I don't know that they've turned on NatSec. I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of Republicans doing a lot of support for NatSec this week particularly.
Yeah. I miss Michael's laugh. When was the last time the MR crew disagreed or changed each other's minds after a discussion? May or may not be live. Genuinely curious. I miss Michael a lot. I don't know.
Changed minds on things. I mean, it depends.
You've changed my mind on some stuff. Yeah, like...
I mean, it's a lot of the stuff is minor, and you kind of forget about it. Like, I think the only, like, the main tension I have, particularly with Sam... and I think people, I think it's a meme at this point. It's not particularly true of Sam, and he might lean into it. But the blame the voter thing, he likes to lean into that, and I'm principally against it. But I haven't changed his mind so much on that. But that's probably where the arguments come in.
Demian, Schoolhouse Rock had 2-minute songs trying to explain complicated ideas. Maybe we should redo them, but go full on with super detailed explanations. They can be 48-minute songs, and we can call it Schoolhouse Rock, Prog Rock. Why don't you do that? I don't have time for that. Y'all Qaeda on Yihad. Do you think with Sam gone, the MR crew, I think you mean, gets more lefty in its commentary? Probably.
I think that I think there's a narrative about Sam's leftiness that I think is a little bit...
It's unfair.
I think it's unfair, but I don't think it's like unhelpful, because I think like I don't think we'd have the Peacock show, for instance, if this perception wasn't there. But I think like Sam appealed to me years ago because one, he was a left voice, particularly at the time that I found him. Like there are very few. I mean, there's any kind of on the spectrum of anarcho-Marxism or anarchism and Marxism and stuff like that. Like, but back in the day, that was not the case. I think the best thing about Sam, which I don't know if he talks about much, but maybe IMs could force this out of him, but he's JFK pilled a little bit, which is that he has questions about the JFK assassination, which I think is a important thing for, I think a lot of people like reading sort of orthodox Marxism is good too. But I think understanding the lengths that power will go to stop things in this country, and the brazen lengths, I think it was one of the interesting things to Sam, and that's also why the 2000 election was such a pivotal moment for him and leading him into politics. I mean, obviously the Iraq War too, but the 2000 election being stolen, like he has a full awareness of that sort of thing. So I think Sam's leftism is actually not as impeached as
it's underrated.
I think
probably.
I think branding exercises by certain people with Patreons like to suggest.
Yeah. I hear we're still talking about force the vote too.
I'm not. I'm done talking about that.
Okay, me too. It's just word on the street. MIDI doctors. Hi, this is the final I am of the day. Hi, Emma and crew. Final I am of the week. Hi, Emma and crew. If the USA left Afghanistan slowly, the power vacuum left would be more contested. Who do we want in that space? Taliban or ISIS? We don't want civil war in Afghanistan to boil over. It's imperative war ends there. The USA was incapable of achieving that. I'd agree. Like, the more drawn out it is, I would imagine that we were seeing more of the ISIS affiliate trying to rear their head. But like in terms of breadth and power, I think in numbers, the Taliban really has them beat. That's why they're kind of choosing to, and this is part of the tactic too, do these bombings.
If you read like Anand Gopal's No Good Men Among the Living, you'll find out that like the 9/11 attacks, there were certain members of the Taliban, and a large part of it, in fact, which was like, actually, this wasn't great for us because we were winning this civil war, and now we have the United States occupation to contend with. So like that's why they're willing to, for instance, allow a level of evacuation to occur. And it's in their interest to, because they think as soon as the United States gets out, that's their country. And to a certain extent, popularly, they might not be wrong, unfortunately.
Right. And I also heard on Democracy Now! This morning, they interviewed an Afghan professor from Afghanistan. And he was essentially saying that a lot of what this ISIS K affiliate is portraying themselves as an alternative to the Taliban that's beholden to the Americans. So like that's also what's happening on the ground here. All right, guys, thank you so much for a great week. I appreciate you embracing me taking over. Sam will be here on Monday. Things will be back to normal, and we will see you then.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light's shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes